Hey y'all, it's Heel Heat time.
Hi everybody, welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles and this is our TNA show for the week. First off, we're going to jump right into the so-so segment of the night. The opener of the show, MVP, Kenny King and Lashley, talking about MVP's power, which brings out Eric Young to tell him who he's going to face later that night, which ends up being turning right into a match with Eric Young versus Kenny King. EY picks up the win. Afterwards, we see a whole thing with the Wolves, Samoa Joe, and Austin Aries helping EY from getting ganged up on, which leads MVP into a whole tirade. I'm just so sick of the MVP evil heel character. I don't know. It just bothers me and makes the segments that he's in annoying and frustrating. Which we also find out that later Eric Young will have to defend his title again, as well as the Wolves will have to defend their tag titles, which will lead me right into the bad segment of the night. The one thing I truly didn't like on the show, and that was actually the main event. Bobby Lashley versus Eric Young with no build-up, winning the world title. Getting screwed because of MVP and Kenny King being there, making Brian Hebner count to 3 after they fired his father, Earl Hebner, earlier in the night, and kind of forced his hand, which led to afterwards, and they kicked every wrestler and everybody out backstage so that they couldn't interfere on Eric Young's behalf, which leads to Bobby Roode making his triumphant return to help his friend Eric Young after the match. To me, like I said, there was no build-up. You had Eric Young, who may or may not have been a great champion, loses to Bobby Lashley in an unadvertised television match just for shock value, I'm guessing. And that's the point. We just had a pay-per-view this weekend, 4 days before. He could have lost on a match that was built to sell a pay-per-view. But he didn't. He lost on the night where there was no build-up, and probably one of the least important things of the night was the match. No, just very frustrating to a fan like me. This is going to get us right into our question of the week. Question of the week of last week was, would you like to see the World X Cup come back? Now, judging by the fact that we didn't get any people saying yes or no, I'm going to say there's little to no interest in it. Which is really surprising, because I kind of enjoyed the old concept. I thought it was cool. I'd personally like to see it come back. That's why I brought it up, and it reminded me when the World Cup came into action. So going off of that, we're going to go right into our question of the week for this week. TNA's put out a poll, polling us, the fans. Do we want to see the 6-sided ring or the 4-sided ring? I'm putting out a poll to you guys. Let me know what you think. Do you want to see him go back to the 6 sides, or do you want him to keep the traditional 4-sided ring? Let us know what you think. Hit us up on Facebook, hit us up on Twitter. Put it down where? Down there in the comments. And while you're at it, hit like. Maybe share us too. Why not? Get us out there to all your friends so they can enjoy what you hopefully enjoy on our show here. Now we're going to go into the good portions of the night, the stuff I actually liked. First up, the Tag Team Championship match, Samoa Joe and Austin Aries versus the Wolves versus Willow and Abyss. I know, shocking, Willow's in a match I actually liked. I thought this was worked well. I liked the way the dichotomy of the 3 different teams. I liked how they worked it all together. Wolves pick up the win, not surprisingly. In a very good match. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a fun match, a great way to display all the talent that they had out there. And it was just cool, just something different. But I really enjoyed it. Good match, good way to go with that. Which leads us up to our next thing. Dixie Carter allowing Tommy Dreamer to come out and air his grievances to her, which, if you're not familiar with, Tommy Dreamer runs a promotion called House of Hardcore. They had booked Bully Ray for a match, and at the last minute he was pulled by Dixie Carter for TNA, doing something with TNA instead of going to House of Hardcore. Dreamer cut a promo at the House of Hardcore show on Dixie, and there was a whole thing over social media, which leads to this. Dreamer comes out, gets an amazing pop. They're in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, which, if you're not familiar with, was one of the hotbed areas of the original ECW, the real ECW. You know, people want to say Philadelphia, New York, which were great. They're great areas for it to go, but ECW shows that used to run in Bethlehem were just as great and amazing, and they had such a great reaction, and there's such a great following for wrestling in the Bethlehem, Pennsylvania area that appreciates what Tommy Dreamer's done and contributed to the business. Dixie, almost, even if she would have been a face in this, would have been a heel by default. Dixie comes out, does her thing. Tommy comes out, grabs a microphone, talks about all that they've been through together, when they worked together to set up Hardcore Justice, when, you know, and then he talked about the pay-per-view, seeing Dixie and her family celebrating Devon Eric's winning with their father there, and remember Dixie was a fan at one point and to start doing right by the fans. Dixie looks like she understands and she's going to make a turn for the better. Hugs Tommy Dreamer. Unfortunately, Tommy Dreamer takes a knee to the man area. I thought it was just a good segment, a great way to bring Dreamer in, maybe cross-promotion with House of Hardcore, which wouldn't hurt either company in my opinion. House of Hardcore is getting a really good buzz on the American independent scene. TNA is TNA. They're kind of stuck in an area where people kind of are done giving TNA shots, because every chance they give TNA, something happens where TNA does something ridiculous. So maybe the people that haven't watched in a few years are going to turn back in to see Dreamer on the show. Hopefully. Also, TNA fans that have no idea there is a House of Hardcore are going to tune in and maybe look for House of Hardcore internet pay-per-views or DVDs or Blu-rays or whatever it may be. I think it's a nice little thing, try and get some corporate synergy. Obviously, Dreamer would love to use some of the guys, Austin Aries, Samoa Joe, I'm sure, Bully Ray, on his shows, so I think it's a good idea for them to work together, personally. Next up was the second Tag Team Championship match of the night. The Wolves had to defend against Bram and Magnus, which ended up in a disqualification when Bram and Magnus brought in a chair. I like what they're doing with the Bram and Magnus characters. I like the vicious side of Magnus, and I like their team. I think they should stay together as a team, build it up again. Magnus's world title run was so poorly booked that it left him looking like a weak wrestler. Him in this role is getting him back to the Magnus that we need him to be. A future superstar, future megastar. After the match, we had Willow and Abyss come down, because they're obviously in a feud with Bram and Magnus, chase him off, and then attack him backstage. You know, the whole thing. Just a good match. I enjoyed it. Their tag team division in TNA is picking up really well. I like that. I like tag team wrestling. I think it's a good addition to a show. I just enjoyed this match altogether. Which leads us to our last but not least thing that I really enjoyed. We had Gail Kim in the ring to introduce or reintroduce us to Tara Terrell, who's coming back off after a year off. If you didn't know, she had a baby, so she took some time off for that. Some much needed new blood, another good wrestler, solid wrestler into the Knockouts division. brings out the beautiful people who try to attack Taryn, end up getting fended off by Gail Kim and Taryn. What are you going to say? Anything that adds to the Knockouts division, make it better, I'm all for. It's just another great women's wrestler that's on the show. And as we know by the matches she had last year with Gail Kim, she can produce. So I think it's an exciting time for the Knockouts division, in my opinion. But coming off of that, we're going to go right into our ratings. Now, if you've seen the show before, or even if you haven't, we have a 1 to 5 scale. 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. 1's a Dixie Carter, 2's a Rockstar Spud, 3's a Gunner, 4's a James Storm, 5's a Bobby Roode. I'm going to give the show a 4, a James Storm. The main event was very disappointing, which probably is the thing that took this from being a 5 to a 4. Other than that, I thought it was a very enjoyable show. The beginning couple segments where MVP's crew kind of overwhelmed everything was a little bit tad tedious, but other than that, really a decent show, really a good, solid wrestling show. Which I think I've went on record on saying this, and this wasn't 100% live, it was on like a 1 hour or 2 hour tape delay, but closer to live than what they normally produce. The live TNA shows, I think, come off way better than the ones that they tape, especially once you get into the second or third week of the tapings, which is the second or third time match that certain wrestlers wrestles within a 2-day period, and it's obvious the fatigue gets to them. But basically, that's all I have to say about that. My name is George Coles, and this has been another episode of Heel Heat.